Another way for us to use the imperfeito is to tell the time in the past, what hours were when something was happening. I believe this is quite logical, but let's see why and let's study some examples. So, for example, we know that we use the imperfeito tense or the imperfect tense when we are referring to a past time or hour. This is going to be one of the topics that you have to learn when to use the tense. Why so? Well, pretty much like when we were referring to age, telling the time also describes a continuous or ongoing state in the past. Time is not a quick action or event that starts and ends. Of course, romantically, you may think that is, okay? But honestly, it's not. It's something that was ongoing during that period in the past. Let's see this example. We can say in Portuguese, eram 3 horas quando ela chegou. It was 3 o'clock when she arrived. In this particular sentence, eram is written in the imperfeito because it refers to the time as a background setting, a continuous moment in the past. The clock was continuously showing 3 o'clock during that time. So the imperfect naturally expresses this ongoing state. When mentioning the time or hour in the past, the focus is not on a single event, but on setting the scene, describing the general state of time at that moment. This is exactly what the imperfeito is designed for, to provide background details and convey a continuous reality in the past. Of course, in this particular example, we have two different tenses. Eram written in the imperfect precisely because it is telling us the time. And then later we have chegou written in the PPS. In the next slide, we are going to see more examples and trying to compare the uses of these two different tenses. Let's break this down a little bit when mentioning the imperfect to talk about time. So here we have another example. And the example, it's setting the scene with a specific time. So we have here eram, one more time, of course, because we are referring to the same example of time. Eram 7 horas, so that's written in the imperfect, quando o jantar começou. I'll be using, by the way, yellow to underline the imperfect and blue to underline the tenses written in the PPS. So, eram 7 horas quando o jantar começou. It was 7 o'clock when dinner started. So, first of all, eram is in the imperfect or imperfeito because, one more time, it describes the time as an ongoing state in the past. Again, time is something continuous, not a quick action that either starts and ends. In this sentence, eram 7 horas indicates that at that moment in the past it was indeed 7 o'clock. And this time was the background or context for what happens next. So the imperfect, okay, is really good for setting the scene or describing conditions that were true over a stretch of time. Let's now analyze the verb written in the PPS, começou. So, começou, started. This verb is written in the pretérito perfeito simples because it describes a specific action that started and finished, or that happened at a definite moment in that past. So the dinner started at 7 o'clock. This is a single completed event. Let me just pause here for a moment to discuss this a little bit more in detail. When we mention that the PPS is a tense to describe the past for something that started and finished in the past, sometimes many students are a little bit puzzled about this concept. For example, the verb to start is usually a quite confusing verb because of what it means. I have students who have asked me if it started, it hasn't finished. But the idea here is just what the verb conveys. So, when we say that the dinner started, the action of starting is finished already. We are not mentioning that the dinner is over. No, when something starts, think of the action. The moment it starts, it's finished. Because I'm just referring to what the verb or what the word start means. Another example. When you start reading a book, you already finished the starting action. You have not yet finished reading the book, but the action of starting is already completed. So that's also the idea here when I say it was 7 o'clock when the dinner started. Therefore, started or começou is written in the PPS because once dinner starts, its action of starting is done. So there is a specific event that starts and finished. But if you think again about the imperfeito, the background, it's still 7 o'clock, or it was still 7 o'clock. So, when you're thinking about these two different tenses, think that the imperfeito with the word eram is used to provide the background information or setting the scene. So it describes the time, again logically, as an ongoing state in that past moment. In contrast, the verb começou is used here to mark a specific completed event within that context, within that background. The action of dinner starting is a single momentary event that happens during that ongoing state described by the imperfect tense. So, going a little bit more in detail, this contrast makes sense because in storytelling or recounting past events, it's quite common to use the imperfect to set the scene and then switch to the PPS to highlight the key actions or in events. So in this case, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating quite a lot, but in this case, the time 7 p.m. is a continuous state in the past, precisely described with the imperfeito. But the action of starting dinner is a concrete, specific event, described therefore with the PPS. So, this contrast allows the speaker to smoothly transition from describing the general context, the time in this case, then to focus on that specific event, dinner starting. So, the conclusion you're going to get from this specific example, and honestly, for pretty much all the examples I'll be giving later, is that one more time, the imperfect is for descriptions, for background information, and ongoing states in the past. Whereas the PPS, which may, as you can see, be found in the same sentence, is being used for actions that are single, completed, and happen at a specific moment in time. Here is another example on how to use time and why is it written in the imperfeito. Look at that example one more time. Eram, so written in the imperfeito, eram 2 da manhã quando ouvi barulho estranho. So it was 2 in the morning when I heard a strange noise. In this example, eram, it was, is used to describe the time as a continuous reality in the past. One more time, framing the context for the event, hearing the noise. So the event of hearing the noise started and finished in the story. But look at this picture, which I try to find to represent this idea. Let's pretend that's me in the example. It is 2 a.m., so time has not finished existing. When I heard, suddenly started and finished, when I heard a strange noise. So, this example also provides another way for us to use the imperfeito, which is going to be the case when we want to refer one action that is happening, described therefore in the imperfect, and gets interrupted by another action, another event, described then in the PPS. I usually like to draw 2 lines. Think of a straight line. This straight line is the ongoing reality in the past. And then this straight line gets interrupted by a verb written in the PPS. So we can also put these 2 ideas on these 2 lines. Think of the yellow line as the 2 a.m. continuous, non-stop. And think of the blue line, I heard a strange noise just over there. So it started and finished. In the next slides, I'll be providing more examples on when to use this idea when something is happening in the past and there is an event, a particular event that interrupts that ongoing action.